Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Mac, and with me I have Gio.
What is good, everyone?
And on today's podcast, again, unfortunately, it's back to back, double header time. I know you heard us from a couple days ago, but it's only been a couple of minutes for Gio and I. On the second part of today's podcast, we're going to be going over and previewing the Champions League final. Unfortunately, we don't have Ray with us, but we both know, and I think Gio can speak for him on this end. We have enough Real Madrid support in this podcast, so I think we're still covered. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and want you to get involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's jump right into it, Gio. So this matchup, I think it's fair to say we have a clear favorite. There is Real Madrid, and as we talked about going into from the previous matchup between Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, the winner of them, in all likelihood, will be the winner of the Champions League final. But they still have that one final hurdle, which is, of course, Borussia Dortmund, who had beaten PSG to make it to the final. In terms of just give you a frame of reference of previous matchups between these two teams, the last time they played against each other, it was quite some time ago when I was looking this up. It was all the way for the Champions League back in 2017, 2018, because they were in the same group stage. And they played two games that season, and Real Madrid won both of them, respectively 3-1 and then 3-2. Total, these two teams, really, they've only played 14 games, with Real Madrid winning 6, Borussia Dortmund winning 3, and 5 draws. So it's been fairly even matchups in terms of their total history. Recent history, there is none. And I think the only player that's going to still be around from that 2017-2018 turnaround time, Toni Kroos, Marco Reus, Modric, maybe. That's probably about it. So again, we're seeing this is a fresh battle between these two teams, and maybe Matt Hummels, because he, of course, went to Bayern Munich and came back. But again, very few and far between. So this matchup is really on kind of uncharted territories for both of these teams. With that being said, Gio, when you first look at these two teams, what jumps out to you? Is there an individual matchup? Is there an individual kind of player that you're looking for? What stands out to you when you're looking at these two teams for the upcoming Champions League final?
I think there's two storylines, and they're very similar storylines. And you almost can't write these storylines. Dortmund, Borussia Dortmund, Marco Reus, last game as a Dortmund player, spent his entire career, pretty much his entire career there. You know, has been offered, countless amount of times for moves, has been offered probably several contracts to go elsewhere and play, but he's refused it and he's stuck with it through
Specifically,
hard.
Bayern Munich in all likelihood.
Yep, yep. The poachers. So
Excellent.
he's had opportunities to leave and he's stuck by this club. Through thick and thin, really. Through the struggles, through the ups, through the downs. Has gone to a Champions League final, has lost to Bayern. Has won the Bundesliga with them. Obviously a thorn in Bayern's back. But that's one German player, and then on the flip side, you have Real Madrid's German player, German star, Toni Kroos, who is retiring at the end of the season. So this is going to be his last match for Real Madrid, or his entirety of his career. This is his last match, and this could be a swan song. It's the perfect send off for either of them if they had to win. I think both teams really aren't just playing for the clubs; they're playing for these guys because they love their teammates that much. It's going to be about just wanting to send these club warriors off in the right way, and I think there's so much just so many articles already written about this, but I think this is going to be the storyline, which German's going to walk away with the perfect swan song. Obviously, the other storylines about Jude, obviously first season at Real Madrid as an Englishman coming in, winning La Liga, could do the double here and win the Champions League as well. There's many storylines, but I think the two storylines here is just about the perfect send off and which player is going to have that perfect send off.
No, I think that's fair. in terms of what type of matchup they may receive and what are the major talking points are. I think for me, it's obviously this maybe plays into on my bias a little bit. There is definitely feels like a David versus Goliath situation here, where Real Madrid they should win it. If you did a draft of in terms of players and try to be able to create one team, how many Borussia Dortmund players would even make it on the Real Madrid starting 11? I
None.
maybe one, maybe, and I think that is being very fortunate here. But that in itself I feel like puts them in a position where they can have that mentality, and it's very similar to, I would argue, a matchup style that they played with against PSG. If they're able to kind of monopolize their defensive third, try to eliminate key players in the opposition, especially a player like Vinicius, who I would argue is kind of like a baby Mbappe in terms of what he tries to do from the left hand side of the pitch. So they were already successful in containing him. If they can do that and eliminate, I would argue, Real Madrid's best offensive threat, as well as stop any late runners. I think those are the two areas that Real Madrid exceed at, where they're able to count score goals in transition and then score goals in late run situations from players coming into the box, a la Jude Bellingham. Those are the two areas of the pitch where I think they excel at. At Dortmund, we've already seen them do a good enough job against a similar type of team and a similar type of archetype type of player. And if that success can transition over to this game, they are in a fair with a fair show. However, they needed a lot of luck. There were many of pro clubs FIFA jokes in regards to PSG, how many times they hit the post and still weren't able to go through, of course, two legs. So maybe they do need to continue to get to luck on their side. I would ask you this, Gio, maybe in a different way. Is there is there a team, let's say, if they win this game between the two, that you feel like there is more of a positive momentum? There's a bigger shift in dynamics of how you feel about those individual players or where they could go after this. Meaning, let's say, for example, if Jude Bellingham wins this and they go on to win Euros, I assume he's probably going to kind of walk in into getting the Ballon d'Or at the end of this year, right? So that I think if he puts that kind of trophy cap in his case, he's already got one hand on that type of trophy, right? Or for example, if you're looking at like Marco Royce, if he goes on and scores and wins this game, is he, I would argue, the best non Bayern Munich player to ever play in the Bundesliga? I think that's the start of that conversation. Do you know what I mean? Is there a result from this game that you think drastically changes how we feel about either these teams or individual players? You know, that maybe you might feel differently if they go on to win, or if you want to be negative, which you know I love to be. If they lose, do you feel drastically different about them?
Um, yeah. I mean, I think it has to be Real Madrid. I think if they lose, it's how can this team on paper lose to a Dortmund side? And 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 don't get me wrong, I love Dortmund. I love what this team has done this season. I've been big on Dortmund and saying that they'd get deep deep into this tournament. To make the final was a little bit of a shock to me, but I always had that feeling that they could. But I think Real Madrid again. This team not only would they not only would they are they're kind of already in the talks of bringing Mbappe in. If they lose this game, we would see again the new modern day Galacticos front to back. Because um Perez is gonna be spending money like crazy, front to back. He's gonna pretty much dump out all the older guys. There's not gonna be much, say, leadership in those roles, but he is gonna make sure he gets every top player in every position that he can to make sure the world knows that this was a one-off, shouldn't have happened. Be very afraid of us because I'm gonna make sure that happens, and he's gonna win every trophy that he physically can. So it's going to change a lot, and by doing that, I think can change a lot for La Liga because there's a lot of financial fair play, this, that, and the fourth, and how does Barca even compete with that, knowing that they're in a financial fair play kind of blunder right now. It's going to change the face of Real Madrid if they lose. It's not only just the Mbappe talks, but front to back, defense to offense. It is going to change the club completely. And there's going to be a whole lot of new faces in those Real Madrid kits soon, if that were to happen.
I agree with you on that. And if Real Madrid lose, I think that would be such a shock to their system that it might put a lot of their I guess their team in a different headspace, as well as their ownership in terms of management of how they're going to try to uproot a lot of the players. One player that is going for sure to be missing, and I think is going to be a key miss for Real Madrid, is Chouameni, who's been confirmed he will miss the final and may even miss Euros. So that for me leads a midfield question for Real Madrid. Now to go into the individual tactics of how we think this game can play out. I want to speak to, I guess, to start off in terms of how I feel Dortmund may try to get in this game and how they can be successful if they do have a chance. And interesting enough, I think it's not too dissimilar to what Bayern Munich did in their best moments against Real Madrid. Those transitional moments for them can be absolutely killer. And I think, and to continue on to the question I asked you, is where whose different feeling you could change individually. If in transition you have 3 or 4 opportunities with Adeyemi jumping into position as after Carvajal vacates his position of Valverde in those moments, which he generally does a fantastic job of, doesn't track
Right.
back. How clinical is he in those moments? We've seen him be very hit and miss. If he scores a goal here and leads potentially a Dortmund to a win, I think his expectation, his place as a kind of a world class player, I think drastically changes. And then you're going to immediately see other teams be able to jump in and sign him. Conversely, on the other side, Jadon Sancho, we've seen, even though I think a lot of it's been a little bit overblown the success he's had at Dortmund. I think he's only scored 2 goals this year since he's played with them, so it's not as if he's been lighting the world on fire. But
Right.
he's have individual Champions League performances that have wowed the system. I think similarly on the other side, if he's dictating the play, has 8 or 9 take-ons, and able to get by his man and create for a Fulkrug or something like that, then I think more of the shine of what we potentially saw him as an individual and as a player, that starts to come to feature. And then again, that whole Manchester United conversation becomes interesting. So I think those 2 individual players, again, I think all their backline, all the midfield, they have to have 8 out of 10 games bare minimum. But if Dortmund are going to pose any threat, it has to come from me, those 2 individual players creating. And at least if they can go deep into the game, a 70th minute with a tie game, if it's 1-1, if it's 0-0, at that point, you're just looking for a little bit of, more recently for me, whenever I ever see anything magical, I think of Luka magic, after Luka Doncic. And if you could get some Marco Royce magic, emulating my boy Luka, you'll take it. Because if he comes on for like the 78th minute, scores tied, at that point for me, I think Dortmund would have felt like they've already won the game and may be in a position to win the game because at that point, Real Madrid are going to be under so much pressure. For you, I guess, Gio, how do you think Real Madrid, in terms of what areas of the pitch, maybe an individual matchup or something that you're looking for? Okay, this is probably, if this player plays well, they win. Or if this player doesn't play well, they probably lose. Who's a kind of a, what's the word I'm trying to say? Who's a type of player, a
Impact
deciding
player.
factor, a deciding
Deciding
factor
factor.
in
Yeah.
terms of that individual player for Real Madrid or matchup.
Uh, I think again, as much as we hate to say it, I think it comes down to Vinny. If not Vinny, my backup player would be Valverde. Similar, similarly against Liverpool in that Champions League final was was massive. And again, I think Ancelotti is such a great manager. He's able to he knows how to speak to each player. He knows how to get the best out of each player, and I think he did it that for Valverde that final, being able to take on players, being able to be slightly more off, adding more offense to his game, and hey, he did it. So again, if he is able to do all the dirty work and let the guys run free, I think even without scoring a goal or providing assist, that's going to be huge for Real Madrid because it takes a lot off of Jude's plate. And then he's going to have more freedom to move up and down the pitch and kind of roam freely, as well as Luka Modric or even Tony Cruz, who, again, we don't expect them to make that tackle. We expect Fetty to make that tackle and provide them the ball so that Tony Cruz can make those pings across the field or those great through balls that he does provide for Vinny. So coming down to it, the X factor of the game for Real Madrid is going to be Valverde.
I think that's a fair shout. I actually look and X Factor. That's exactly what I was looking for. I struggle with my words. English is not my first language. Psych, no, it is. But either way, for me, I look at his. I would argue his midfield partner right now, with Tchouaméni being gone, and we know Toni Kroos is going to start. For me, Camavinga in the midfield. I think the amount of work rate he will have to put in this game, in all likelihood, playing the full game, um, because of the injury, and I assume Toni Kroos is going to come off at some point. Luka Modric comes in, and Luka Modric is phenomenal on the ball. That just means more running for Camavinga in the center of midfield because Valverde is already taking care of the entire right wing for Dani Carvajal.
Right.
So for me, I think he has to do such a good job in denying that first pass through before cutting out a pass to Adriani, cutting a pass out to Jadon Sancho, jumping in to be able to make a tackle in the midfield, to preventing Dortmund ever getting on the front foot and Real Madrid really wrestling control of the game. Aside from him, their attacking threat, Rodrigo, I think his role is going to be very interesting because everyone's looking at, and I think it's fair, Jude Bellingham and Vinicius have to have good games. But if Rodrigo, who you know me, I've definitely been critical of him in terms of what he can do. But against a low block, I think that's what he excels at. He's very, very good in tight spaces. I think he's a good decision maker. So playing against a team that's going to sit back and be compact, I think that's where he's playing his best. So I think this may be an opportunity for him to show his skills and show his stuff, as well as realistically, he's fighting for his place for next year as well. It's all the pressure's on now for him, and he will be the odd man out when Mbappe does come. So if he's able to at least make it a conversation of, hey, let's figure out a way to make me play too, I think that he'll do his best to do so, and I think this is a matchup he could do that. But I guess, Gio, to wrap up our podcast, let's finish off with some predictions. I'm going to assume Ray, just because Ray, is very neutral. For me, he's like the Switzerland of Europe, in some ways, where he's just, I don't want to piss anyone off. So my guess, if you were asking me what Ray would say, he would say 2-1 Real Madrid. That's my guess. But what are yours before I give mine? What's your thoughts?
Are you asking me who I think the winner will be?
Yeah, and what's the scoreline?
Okay. Well, if you guys can't tell already, I dyed my hair to look exactly like him. I'm joking. I don't think Dortmund will win. But I think it's going to be 3-1 Real Madrid. I think Dortmund will score, but I think they'll lack chances. They'll lack chances because I think Real Madrid is going to be able to hold the ball for much longer than we expect. I think their midfield is going to have a very strong game, and just being able to create these chances. And once Real Madrid is up, say 2-1, I think Dortmund's going to chase the game a little, and then thus opening more space and them getting their third one. So I'm going to say 3-1 Real Madrid, and they lift their 15th trophy.
Gio, I'll be honest with you. You had me spot on exactly what my prediction was. I think it's going to be Real Madrid 3-1. And for me, I compare and contrast this to the 2015 Champions League final between Barcelona and Juventus, where Juventus were a good team, but Barcelona were just different levels, mate. Like, they had complete domination, and I never felt like for a second of that entire game that Barcelona weren't going to win it, because they had the attacking threat. They were good enough defensively. They can control the midfield. Every aspect of their team was better than the Juventus' team. Not to discredit them, again, good players on that team. You're talking about players like, at that point, before all, the bets of Pogba, like Marquisio, Buffon was still on that team, Bonucci was still on that. That's a quality team. But when you're going against that prime Barca, you're just going to lose. And unfortunately, it feels like, even though I would argue both of those teams are not at the same levels of what I'm making the comparison to, but I think the degree of separation between those two teams is that high. So I think what will in all likely happen, Real Madrid will score within the first 20 minutes, and it's going to be cruise control. That's my personal opinion. And to be honest with you, before we wrap the podcast, that's why we were doing this early, because Ray and I will actually be in Mexico, so I'll be watching with a lot of Real Madrid fans. So I'll probably turn off the game after 20 minutes because I ain't trying to watch the rest of that. That's my thoughts. But before we wrap up, though, Gio, any other thoughts in regards to this game? Any other player you may be excited about? Any other talking point you want to be able to go over?
No, of course. Just hopefully, let Sancho have a good game. Hopefully, he can mend things with Ten Hag and maybe start fresh.
Real Madrid, Man United's back, baby.
Hey, no, not by any means, not by any means. Yeah, back in the Europa League. But No, I think it's going to be a very good game. Nonetheless, I think there's still going to be a lot of tactics. We can't count Dortmund out. We've counted Dortmund out. I think people have counted Dortmund
Absolutely.
out since the quarterfinals. So, they've come out and proved a lot of people wrong, and beaten a lot of great teams to get here. So it's going to be a good match.
No, I'm very excited too. The game's not won on paper. That's why they played the game. So very excited to see what happens. And again, afterwards, when you hear from us next, to be honest, we don't know yet. We're going to do some sort of recap in regards to the Champions League at some point. Hopefully, if we get an interesting game, maybe we feel a little bit of pressure to do a little bit earlier. But if not, what we'll do is we'll definitely come back and wrap up really the entirety of the season as a whole. But with that being said, this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe on our social medias. That's House of_Footy. Please comment on our YouTube channel in regards to your predictions, who you think will win this game. In addition, if you have any suggestions or general banter, please get in touch with us at houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But with that being said, that's peace out from me and Gio.
Peace out, guys.